Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming along. I should begin with my disqualifications for doing this talk. Frank Barry invited me several years ago to give the talk, and my first reaction was, never in my whole life have I thought about the 1853 Great Industrial Exhibition. And there might even be few people here who are in the same boat or were then. But nonetheless, I became interested very quickly because the incongruity is startling. There's a kind of shock value to the near coincidence in time between the Great Famine and the Great Exhibition. You know, in 1853, Dublin hosted a great industrial exhibition when Ireland was barely recovering from the ravages of the Great Famine. The effects of malnutrition and immiseration were plainly visible in the countenances and the clothing of many of the rural poor. Emigrant ships were crammed with economic refugees, and some cemeteries were, bursting at the seams. So this is the intriguing bit. Why an industrial exhibition, great or otherwise, against this catastrophic backdrop? And some parts of Ireland, particularly in the West, had barely begun to recover from the ravages of that catastrophe. Indeed, in 1853, the same year as the exhibition, the English surveyor Thomas Colvin Scott was noting in his journal the extreme deprivation and loss still painfully visible in the area he was surveying in Connemara. And here's one of the eyewitness accounts by Scott on squatters eking out an existence at Arushbeg in West Galway. And it also carries an insight, I think, into the psychological after effects of famine. So I quote, "I saw these subtenants at work, most of them widows, forsaken wives and young women, carrying peat on their backs. They were very nearly in a state of nudity and appeared from actual want to be almost reduced to a state of idiocy. There is no Irish animation and buoyancy here, but a stealthy and timid look, as if these poor souls were ashamed of their condition and lost to the faintest hope of escape from the wretchedness and misery." And I've put idiocy in red there to highlight it. I mean, it's relatively unusual to find a reference to the psychological trauma, if you like, etched on the persons of survivors of the famine. So the question again, why an industrial exhibition, great or otherwise, against that backdrop? Indeed, might one think of the venture as a giant folly, rather in the spirit of a Greek temple or similar type structures which were dotted on landed estates in Britain and Ireland in the period? Or alternatively, might this extravagant and temporary display of artworks and industry be more akin to an Irish version of a Potemkin village, sited this time on the lawns of Leinster House rather than the river Dnieper? So in effect, a facade designed to impress and to mislead a visiting monarch, mislead her about the true state of affairs in her realm as she was escorted round Leinster Lawn by her loyal Lord Lieutenant in Dublin Castle. Now, I'll return to those questions later, but clearly we have to begin the story with that great entrepreneur and philanthropist, William Dargan, and indeed with the Royal Dublin Society. Dargan is known chiefly for his role in developing the railway system in Ireland, which is maybe mentioned, I think it's been mentioned already. generated valuable employment during the Great Famine itself. But of course, Dargan had a whole range of other business interests as well. William Dargan wrote to the Royal Dublin Society on the 24th of June 1852, proposing that there be an exhibition, and I quote, of more than usual prominence in place of the triennial exhibition which the RDS ran for some decades. And Dargan offered to underwrite the cost of the venture to the tune of £20,000, in excess of 2 million in present-day values. So in the overblown rhetoric of the compiler of the official record of the Great Industrial Exhibition, the year 1853 may be hailed in the annals of history as that in which a glorious effort was made for the realization of a great national good, and that too by the enterprising spirit of one mighty man. The spirit animating the enterprise was very much in tune with the Royal Dublin Society's mission of improvement, or what we might nowadays call economic and social development. And the aim was to showcase examples of Irish industry and arts, while also securing exhibits from other countries with a view to promoting economic progress, as well as a refinement of consumer taste. Committee was set up, competition opened for the design of the exhibition halls, and we heard about that this morning. And as early as 18th of August 1852, the first stake was driven into the ground on Leinster Lawn. Emissaries were sent to various cities in Europe, including Paris, Brussels, Berlin, Dresden, The Hague, Hamburg, to solicit exhibits. The Emperor of the French, no less, assured these representatives of his most cordial cooperation. Demand for exhibition space was so strong that the committee decided in early December to make the exhibition building much larger. The original design comprised of a central hall flanked by a northern hall and a southern hall. Again, we heard more about that in far more detail than I'm able to, than I've got this morning. But gradually there were added halls for fine arts, machinery, furniture, agricultural implements, and antiquities. William Dargan continued to reach deep into his pockets. The original 20,000 was increased to 26,000 and then 40,000. From inception to birth took less than 1 year, and the Great Industrial Exhibition was opened to the public on the 12th of May 1853. So working successfully to this timescale was in itself an impressive achievement. You know, if you think of some modern examples like the National Children's Hospital and prolonged gestation periods, yeah, it really is quite a remarkable achievement. On Thursday, the 12th of May, 1853, the exhibition opened to a great fanfare provided by close on 1,000 musicians. So this great ensemble set the tone for the exhibition and suggests paternal and patriotic endeavour on the part of the organisers, but perhaps also a touch of conspicuous consumption. The Dublin Evening Post, and indeed most Irish newspapers, commented favourably on the opening. The exhibition was, and I quote, a stupendous structure in which is gathered the wonderful productions of science, art, and manufactures. These included the new technology of photography, steam-powered and horse-drawn agricultural machinery, and works of art from home and abroad. And most of the items in the exhibition came from the Three Kingdoms, though it did have an international dimension, and particularly so in the fine arts. Predictably, I suppose, Irish stone crosses, including casts of the Cross of Kells, found their way into the Grand Hall, as did Bogo models of the principal antiquities of Ireland, and I quote, which displayed the greatest taste and mechanical skill, comprising the Rock of Cashel, Clonmacnoise, Monaster Boyce, Glendalough, and so on. A touch of Celticism there. Inevitably, the exhibition revealed the largely non-industrial character of Ireland. I expect Frank Barry will be picking up on this shortly. That's at least outside of the Belfast region, commenting that the, in quotes, mechanical spirit had yet to take root. The Times of London scoffed, I quote, "It is not good that a high-spirited nation should be without the means of concealing in some degree its own sense of humiliation." And I was rather surprised by this. One of the sharpest responses came from my neck of the woods, Belfast. The Belfast newsletter accused the Times of libelling the Irish race and character. In her own time, my friend, who I stayed with last night, Cormac O'Grada, has observed critically that the exhibition served to demonstrate the limited extent of manufacturing in Ireland. Fergus Mulligan, who's written a fine biography of William Dargan, takes a more sympathetic view, but admits that some of the Irish handicraft exhibits were less than impressive. Among such were, and I quote, horsehair ornaments made by the children of the poor peasantry of the west of Ireland. Also noteworthy, according to the official compiler of the record of the exhibition, also noteworthy was a glass case full of beautiful work supplied by the inmates of Grange Gorman female prison. And he added, "We cannot omit noticing the stand of the Dundrum Lunatic Asylum, which was well worthy of observation," according to him. And I'm sure it was. This was not the stuff of which industrial revolutions were made. Still, you could argue this is to miss the point of the exhibition, which was as much about the future as the present. Now, if we're looking for an economic impact, however diffuse, and the impact inevitably will be diffuse, we might look to the agricultural section, where English and Scottish ploughs and harrows, steam engines, thrashing machines, iron horse rakes, a self-acting reaping machine, and assorted other improved machines and implements were on display. And I don't find it hard to believe that some landlords, land agents, farm stewards, and strong farmers were encouraged to adopt improved methods. Indeed, many of those machines and implements were commonplace in the Ireland of the 1950s and 60s, rural Ireland, where I grew up. You know, just then as the era of horse husbandry was drawing to a close, to be superseded by rural electrification, the tractor, and new forms of technology. But the suggestion is that the Great Exhibition and subsequent exhibitions and agricultural shows contributed to the diffusion and adoption of new techniques of production. And if I had more time, I would relate that to improvements in the Irish economy in the second half of the 19th century. I mean, we know that income per capita was rising. One view of that is, excuse me, the country was being depopulated, and that served to increase the value of labour, push up wages, and so on. But I think there's another side to it as well, which is that you had genuine productivity increases in the post-famine economy. It's not simply a question of getting rid of the poorer strata of Irish society. Now let's move to the finances of the Great Industrial Exhibition. A quick summary: an expenditure of 90,000, though some would suggest if you add in contributions in kind from Dublin, it may well be close to 100,000. But anyhow, in round figures, 90,000, an income of 70,000, and so a loss of 20,000, over 2 million in present-day values. So in seeking to understand how this loss came about, we might begin by looking at attendances and the admission prices being charged, and then the cost side of the equation. As regards attendances, the figure often given is 1.1 million. Now that's a truly remarkable response, bearing in mind that the census of Ireland for 1851 returned an adult population of both sexes of less than 4 million. So it's hardly conceivable. And I would suggest the figure of 1.1 million is exaggerated for two reasons. First, it includes exhibitors who are necessarily present each day, and they tended to be added up day by day, giving a rather large figure at the end. And second, it makes no allowance for repeat visits, which of course season ticket holders in particular would have made. So I think a better measure for the popular appeal of the exhibition is to look at the numbers of people who paid cash at the door each day. Though clearly that will also include some who made repeat visits, but perhaps not too many. Anyhow, I would suggest an attendance figure for the exhibition of something like 600,000, or perhaps a little bit lower than that. And by way of comparison, the Great Exhibition of 1851 in Hyde Park in London, as we heard last night, drew 6 million visitors. Actually, I suspect that's visits and not visitors. But, you know, in view of the state of the Irish economy and society at the time, the beginning of the 1850s, still in the shadow of the Great Famine, that is 600,000 is an impressive magnitude and testifies to the popular appeal of the Great Exhibition. Now, I didn't know this at the beginning. It was only when I looked more carefully at the figures. Attendances varied markedly during the 6 months of the exhibition, and I think it's instructive to tease out why this might have been so. So have a look at this chart. Now, when this came up on my screen, I printed it out, I thought, my God, what's gone wrong? But don't shoot the messenger just yet. There is an explanation. I mean, I was particularly puzzled by those drops in attendance in particular days and the regular character of those deviations. And I suppose the other feature of the chart that cries out for attention is the peak on the 15th of August. I don't know if anyone has any suggestions as to why that might be the case. It actually trumps Queen Victoria's visit at the end of August. I mean, there is a spike there, but 15th of August is your only man in terms of attendance of the Great Exhibition. Well, I went back to the folklorist Kevin Danaher, who's a lovely book on Irish calendar customs, and he fills in the detail. Féile Mhuire Zavor, the festival of Our Lady in the Harvest. I'm quoting from him now. Being a holiday in the middle of the farmer's busiest season was doubly welcome because fine weather gave the opportunity of excursions and other outdoor pursuits. in West Limerick and North Kerry, servants and workpeople always included in their bargain with the employing farmer, the stipulation that the 15th of August and the races of Listowel were to be holidays. I've never been to the Listowel races, but I'm sure it's a wonderful event. And the 15th of August, of course, is the Catholic feast of the Assumption of Our Lady into heaven, which was a day of leisure and measurement across rural Europe, not simply in Ireland. And the feast day in 1853 just happened to fall on a Monday. And I should mention, you can't really see it here because the scale is too compressed, but Monday was the most popular day for attendance throughout the exhibition period. So what's the significance of Monday? Well, Monday, according to custom, was the weekday when tradesmen and artisans, or at least some of them, took the day off, sometimes referred to as Saint Monday, more pronounced in England rather than in Ireland, I guess, a more urban industrial society. Indeed, none other than the spoiljoy Cardinal Cullen, this was years later, denounced trade unionists and tradesmen who, I quote, devote Monday as usual to dissipation. So Saint Monday and the Feast of the Assumption coincided to reinforce each other, producing the remarkable, that's about 15,000 attending on that day. And these are fee-paying customers. Now, those are some of the fluctuations in the numbers attending. So I want to look at trends over time. Early attendance was very low, in the hundreds to begin with, and attendance then picked up, registering 5,000 to 6,000 visitors per day. Actually, let's look at the... I think I might be missing a slide. Yeah, it's come out. It's all right. But anyhow, alarm bells must have been ringing, by late August, September. And then you see a great pickup right at the end. So the question arises, why? Why that spectacular rush in at the end, in the final few weeks? And what I'm going to suggest is, this is, in a moment, this is an interesting historical illustration of price discrimination in practice. Season tickets were offered at 2 guineas for gents and 1 guinea for ladies, with boys charged at the ladies' rates. Girls are not mentioned. So almost £15,000, one-fifth or so of total revenue, was raised from the sale of season tickets even before the exhibition opened, which of course gave rise to optimistic predictions as to the outcome. Now, for those paying at the door, and I think those are the most interesting ones, they form the bulk of those attendances over time. For those paying at the door, the charge was initially 5 shillings for the day, which, accords with the very low numbers attending. Because just think of it, as the equivalent of the weekly wage of a labourer when fully employed, and many, of course, were unemployed irregularly as well. 5 shillings was clearly beyond the reach of the mass of the people. And the full cost would have exceeded the entrance fee, as a day's wages might have to be foregone. And then there might be travelling and subsistence costs, particularly from those coming from outside Dublin. So looking at the pricing policy of the organisers, begins with 5 shillings. Those of us of a certain age will be able to convert into pence. So 60, pence, and then a reduction to half a crown, 30 pence. I think that was at the end of June, yeah. On the last Monday of June, the fee was reduced. Sorry, it was reduced further on the last Monday of June to 1 shilling, 12d on the chart there. And possibly in desperation, the fee was reduced still further to 6 pence, 6d per day, for the last 3 weeks of the exhibition. And that sent the numbers soaring, which suggests that attendance demand for places of the exhibition was highly sensitive to price. In fact, you can see there on the left-hand slide the representation of the pricing policy of the organisers, and on the other slide, the variations, trends over time. And when you get to the 6D zone, attendances shoot up. Now, that might suggest that the organisers had got the pricing policy badly wrong. Because remember the huge financial loss sustained by the exhibition. And indeed, the financial officer for the exhibition, Thomas Dillon Jones, admitted as much, regretting that the popular £60 per day admission fee had not been introduced much earlier. And in a way, the evidence in the second chart there supports that view. A critic might push the argument a stage further, that price discrimination itself was a bad idea, and that a single low price, uniformly low price, would have generated a higher overall revenue. I think that's hard to credit. It's true that abandoning different price tariffs, or the stepwise reductions you see there, would have resulted in larger attendances, but at the cost of leaving behind a substantial consumer surplus or a willingness to pay more. Remember, this is in a society characterised by steep inequalities of income and wealth. And a consumer surplus would have been creamed off by the better off sections of Irish society. So I would suggest it's far better and more equitable to shake down the nobility, the gentry, and the intermediate social groups, and then open to a larger, poorer clientele. Now, it's impossible to know what the optimal pricing strategy might have been, because this was, as we know, a once-off venture. But the likelihood is it would have been some variation on what you see on the first slide there. It could have been better, I think there's no doubt. And that brings us to the elephant in the room, or the elephant on Leinster Lawn. Might the heavy financial losses have been avoided altogether by using a different price structure, as T.G. Jones seems to suggest? Now, you can do kind of back-of-the-envelope calculations, but you need an awful lot of sixpences, for example, to cover a loss of 20,000. So I think we're driven to the conclusion that the scale of the exhibition and its associated costs meant that a break-even point was not achievable, irrespective of the pricing policy in place. The ambition was too great, even for a great industrial exhibition. So where does that leave us? Well, in the red, of course, but I think we run the twin dangers of attributing too much and too little to the great industrial exhibition. There were, of course, benefits, but hardly on the scale implied by the official accounts. In the short term, the exhibition gave a boost to construction activity and consumer services in the capital, and probably made a contribution to tourism development. The likelihood is that it helped diffuse technical knowledge, particularly in relation to farming. And perhaps the most immediately tangible and long-term outcome was the establishment of the National Gallery of Ireland, which arose at least indirectly from the Great Exhibition. So in conclusion, I used the image of a Potemkin village at the beginning. Let me try a different image with rather more substance. That is to see the Great Exhibition as a hall of mirrors in which many different aspects of Irish life, then and later, found reflection. Strands of the ideologies of the time are plainly visible. The Smilesian emphasis on self-help, notions of patriotism, racial differences, doctrines of progress or improvement, the acceptance of a society stratified along lines of social class with a monarch at the apex, loyalty to the crown, and a sense of Irish nationality, albeit within the framework of the United Kingdom of Britain and Ireland. We might also see the exhibition as an instance of philanthropic tradition associated with captains of industry and commerce. This was already evident in the charitable endeavour of Quaker business people and Belfast Presbyterian merchants dating back into the 18th century, and would find wider expression in our own time with the emergence of Irish multinational companies and philanthropic bodies. I mean, some contemporary examples include the Smurfords, the O'Reillys, the Noctons, and at one remove, Chuck Feeney and Atlantic Philanthropies. Then there's William Dargan himself, Ireland's railway king, a philanthropist and visionary, undoubtedly. But to revert to an earlier theme, was he colluding in drawing a veil over the horrors of the Great Famine? Recall that Dargan had first-hand experience of the Great Famine. Had employed thousands of workers during it, and precisely because of that background, it seems more plausible to me to view the exhibition as an implicit acknowledgement of the famine disaster, and more explicitly as a clarion call towards improved living standards and achieving greater material security. And the pathway of progress would be paved by hard work and the kinds of technologies and entrepreneurship reflected in the exhibition. And finally, it may seem a little far-fetched, but I can't help thinking of T.K. Whittaker's intervention just over a century later with the publication of Economic Development and the First Programme for Economic Expansion. This was at the end of the 1950s, another decade of despondency and economic stagnation. As with the Great Exhibition, the effect may have been more psychological than material. But Whittaker would argue that instilling confidence was an essential element in producing economic and social recovery. So in a somewhat similar vein, the Great Exhibition might be seen as embodying a commitment to break with a dismal past, fired by a vision of a better future. And it's not a bad message to take away on the 170th anniversary of the Great Industrial Exhibition. Chinna Will, thank you.